Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. Also, always 1776.com, a free site. Today is December 1st, 2023. Stocks up big. Gold at an all-time high. Bitcoin up big. Let's talk about it. What could possibly go wrong? But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, let me just say, I don't believe in the stock market rally. Right? I believe the news is upside down right now. You need to be expecting a recession. The only part of today I believe in is gold jumping off the page, silver doing well, Bitcoin doing well. Right? The rest of it I don't believe. Understand, the Federal Reserve apparently is hinting that they're going to start cutting rates at some time in the future. Folks, you need to be cautious. According to reports, there are $15 trillion. Let me repeat that. $15 trillion in marketable public debt that will need to be refinanced in the next 4 years. Right, folks? That's why they want to cut interest rates. It's because the ongoing debt service costs for the federal government right now is on par with the annual costs of maintaining our military. Right? There was a time in my life, in my adult life, when we used to ask the question, are we overspending on our military? Folks, you can't even ask that question today because the debt service is going to soon exceed what we spend annually on our military. Also, let me just point out too that we all like cheap debt. Right? If I can, buy that car and get a break on the interest rate, what's wrong with that? I'll save money. Right? Well, just understand that banks right now are trying to increase reserves. I need for people to understand that banks right now can't even properly price their bonds. They can't acknowledge the exposure. They're using accounting loopholes, courtesy of the government, to hide the fact that the spike in yields has made the bonds they're holding drop significantly in value. So you've already had some bank failures. Folks, they're just getting started. Right? Let's talk about cheap rates. I'm sure there are many people who understand that they would not have that credit card in their wallet if they weren't paying more than 20% interest annually. You got the card because you're paying elevated rates. Right? You understand that. So now we're hearing that they're going to cut interest rates and things like that. Are you sure that that's a good thing for this economy? Shouldn't we be cutting the use of fiat currency? Shouldn't we be cutting federal spending? Right, folks, it's a nightmare right now. You'd be surprised how precarious the American economy is right now. The Congressional Budget Office is forecasting that average deficits a few years from now will exceed $2 trillion annually. Folks, how are we going to refinance the debt that we have to roll over? Sure, we can try to manipulate the markets. We can have interest rate suppression. How's that working out for Japan? A country that right now has a debt that's greater than 2 times its GDP. So, some stocks I've mentioned here online during better times. Right, Open Door, for example, up big today. No doubt, there are some people out there who heard that interest rates might be getting reduced sometime in the future, and they're thinking, hey, that's bullish news for housing. Right, lower rates means that borrowers can afford more houses. Well, folks, not so fast. Right, I'm bearish now on Open Door. I'm more bullish on the inverse ETF, SRS. Right, young people don't want to pay 10 to 15 times their annual earnings to purchase a home. Right, you have multiples to annual income that are unsustainable in places like California, New York City. Right, you have insurance problems related to house insurance right now throughout the state of Florida. There's some excellent videos online on YouTube, right? Nick Gurley and others that I encourage viewers to check out. So, what you need to do is you need to ask yourself, why is Warren Buffett hoarding cash right now? Right, folks? It's because he expects a recession. It's because times are bad. You don't want to be buying a new house right now. You don't want to be buying most of the stocks that went up today right now. Think about why gold is jumping off the page, and it's just starting to jump off the page. It's because people believe that if they keep their money in fiat currency, it's going to lose value. That's how bad it is. The dollar dropped today. Folks, that's just starting. I understand. People want to talk about $1 milkshake. Okay, great. Sounds good. I understand globally. When times are bad, people flock initially to the dollar. Right? The dollar is preferable to whatever their local currency is. Okay, fine. Just understand. The debt burden is a systemic problem. It's not going away anytime soon. It likely is not going away during my lifetime. Right? If the Federal Reserve loses credibility with investors, folks, interest rates are going to jump. They're not going to decrease. Right? Any rate cut now is going to be artificial. You understand, too, that your bank can announce that it's cutting rates for people with pristine credit. They might be an increasingly smaller part of the world. In terms of the monetary supply, if the banks are having financial trouble, if JP Morgan is actually moving in and buying banks, if credit is decreasing across the United States, what do you think is going to happen next? You understand that unemployment is a lagging indicator. Right? Things go bad. And then, after a while, an employer who values the employees because there's a cost involved with teaching them how to do the job. Right? You have a sunk cost in your employees. Well, even those employers are going to say things are so bad, I'm going to have to let people go. Because the downturn in the economy is an existentialist threat to the business. Right? You can be employee of the month. You still lose your job if the business goes out of business. We just had Cyber Monday, and we're hearing about all kinds of, economic activity that took place. But I want you to look at the composition of the activity that took place. Normal retail stores didn't do that well, folks. They didn't. Right? The stores that did well, the entities that are thriving are discount outfits, like PDD Holdings, the parent company of Temu, TEMU. Right? The symbol is PDD. In other words, people are buying Christmas gifts and they're trying to save money while doing so. Long term, folks, that's going to be deflationary. Right? Expect unemployment to increase. Right? Happy days are not here again. We're headed into tough times. Let's also stop kidding ourselves. You know, no election of any particular individual is going to save us from the economic downturn. Right? Simply put, Donald Trump did a terrible job of controlling spending. I understand we had a pandemic. Now we realize we shouldn't have rushed into the lockdown. Right? The state of Texas is suing Pfizer. Think about that. Right? But just understand, we spent a lot of money during the Trump administration. With the Biden administration, folks, it's been terrible. Right? The budget, the spending has reached really uncontrollable levels to the point where our debt service is now on par with our military spending. In other words, the debt service is starting to endanger our viability as a country, our ability to defend ourselves. Now, you just had a debate. I don't want to get too political here, right? But you just had a debate. And I'm not here favoring either of these guys. Between governors from two of the most populated states in the United States, right? Ron DeSantis from Florida and Gavin Newsom from California. Folks, I'm in California. I voted for Gavin Newsom in the past, right? We have a budget deficit right now in California. There's a big issue in California for those paying attention on how we're going to afford public pensions. Right? We're not quite as bad as some states. Illinois has us beat in terms of mismanagement of pensions. Right? But just to understand, we're in bad shape. And apparently we're in an era where somehow Gavin Newsom is considered viable for the presidency. Right? I would argue that whether we pick Biden or Trump or Gavin Newsom, the hole we're in right now is so deep, it's going to take a long time for us to get out of it. Right? There was a time here where I was talking about having a barbell strategy on Open Door. Folks, housing is at risk. If you have a 3% mortgage, how much house would you be able to buy if you sell the house you have and then graduate to an 8% mortgage? Right? You understand the first few years of these typical 30-year mortgages, the banks make most of the money. How many of us are going to hold the house that we have longer than 8 years? Right? So, today, everyone's giddy. Right? I'm looking at my own portfolio and I'm saying, wow, some things went up. Okay, great. Right? Folks, prepare for a recession. We're kidding ourselves. Let me also point out, too, that we deluded ourselves for so long that we didn't make the investments that needed to be made. Right? So much time and energy were spent on solar energy and wind, right? When fossil fuels are how most of us gather energy. right? Most of your energy consumption comes from fossil fuels. Understand, too, here in the United States, we're acting as if China is not actively using coal. Right, folks? I have news for you. If you're India, if you're China, if you're, trying to transition to a modern economy, wind and solar aren't enough. It's not going to cut it. So as a result, you have an opportunity here with natural gas, quite frankly, right? I'm expecting oil, natural gas. Didn't Saudi Arabia, by the way, regarding oil, just threaten some cuts? Right, folks, understand. Saudi Arabia has leverage in the area in part because of the delusion we've been on in terms of overinvesting, quite frankly, in wind and solar. Right? So the chickens, let me quote Malcolm X, one of my favorite philosophers. The chickens are coming home to roost. Right? You can celebrate today in the stock market. Hey, nobody likes the bull market more than me. Right? You can celebrate and say, all right, we had a good day. See the bigger picture. If Warren Buffett is hoarding money, you need to be very afraid right now. You need to expect real estate prices to drop. Folks, commercial real estate in places like San Francisco have already dropped tremendously. Please use AI, use Google, use Bing, use your favorite search engine and look up the changing prices. Right? If you want to go to a place that's half empty, just go to the local mall in your town and realize that with the surge of online shopping, the malls can no longer cut it in many areas. Right? EVs. We distorted the market. I know, always with the best of intentions. We distorted that market by, all these government subsidies and what have you. Right? What I want people to do is to ask themselves, and I mean this, is our electrical grid ready? Are you sure? Are you sure that environmentally we're better off with EVs than we would be with internal combustion engines, given the fact that we're going to have to upgrade our electrical grid? Right? Given the fact that we're going to have to upgrade the infrastructure in general. Right? If I'm out by Fresno, right? Again, I'm in California, Bay Area. If I drive to Fresno and I'm in the middle of nowhere, right? Am I more likely to see a gas station or a charging station? Right? I don't know about you, but folks, here in California, electricity prices have been jumping. How do you know where they're going to end up? How viable is the business without all the subsidies? Without all the loss leaders? Right? For those wondering how to play it, just understand EVs require several times the amount of copper that internal combustion engine cars require. Right? And so just be aware of the fact that, companies like Freeport-McMoRan are very well positioned for what's coming. Right? But understand, it's foolhardy when states say we're only going to allow the sale of EVs past a certain date. Right, folks? How can you do that without the proper infrastructure? It wasn't so long ago that here in California, we were having blackouts. Right? Let's end the identity politics where people are saying, hey, I'm an environmentalist. And, so I support everything green. Right? And let's get real. And let's realize that most of us are still using fossil fuels. that the cost of EVs, while they're dropping, let me concede that, are still very expensive. There are many families who don't have the money to buy a new car, whose internal combustion engine operates just fine, right? You now have lines forming, right? There's a EV charging setup around the block from where I live, right? It used to be empty. Now I roll by there on some mornings and you got cars waiting for it. Right, folks? Are you sure we're ready to make all these new investments during a recession? In any event, think it through. Just understand, one of the biggest stories happening right now in the United States is completely underreported, and it's the cost that we're enduring, having to roll over the debt that we've had to higher interest rates. Right, folks? That's substantial. That's impacting government's ability to provide for us in other ways. Right? I haven't seen the presidential candidate prepared to get in front of a crowd and talk about how we have to cut federal spending by 40%. Right? We're just not at that stage yet of realism. We're still in a world of delusion. That's how I view the jump in rates today. Right? I was once here online talking about how Open Door would have a natural monopoly if certain things broke their way. Right? Well, let me just point out I'm off that boat. Right? I view housing as a huge bubble. Right? The rising yields have killed the bond market. Please pay close attention to the bond market. Right? Pay close attention to Treasury auctions. Realize that if the Federal Reserve loses credibility with market participants, interest rates are going to jump, not fall. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.